I never thought I'd be sharing a story like this, but I need to get it off my chest. A few weeks ago, I moved into a new house. It's an old, somewhat run-down place, but it was all I could afford. I thought it had character, but I didn't expect what I'd find in the basement. As I was settling in and exploring the house, I noticed a heavy wooden door at the far end of the basement. It was partly hidden behind some old furniture, and the realtor had never mentioned it. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to see what was behind it. Behind that door, I found a small, dimly lit room, walls lined with dusty shelves. What really caught my attention, though, were the rows of old VHS tapes. Dozens of them, all stacked up like a macabre collection. The labels on the tapes were unmarked except for a date. Naturally, I couldn't resist the urge to pop one into my old VHS player. The video quality was terrible, but it showed a room bathed in an eerie red light. At first, I thought it was some kind of bizarre art project, but as I continued watching, I noticed something off. In the dim room, there was a man, or at least it looked like one. He was standing with his back to the camera, his limbs contorted at odd angles, like some grotesque marionette. He didn't move, not even a twitch, for what felt like hours. The whole thing was giving me serious chills. The next tape was even worse. It showed the same room, but this time the man was gone, and there was a low, guttural sound. The camera moved slowly, and I saw something in the corner. There were words scrawled on the walls in what looked like blood. I wish I could tell you I had the guts to turn it off, but morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I kept watching more tapes. Each one revealed something more disturbing, from cryptic symbols to eerie whispers in the background. I couldn't stop, despite my growing dread. A week later, the nightmares started. The same unsettling images from the tapes plagued my sleep. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I could hear whispers echoing in the dark. It was driving me to the brink of insanity. I decided to pack up the tapes and take them to the local police, convinced they were evidence of some heinous crime. But when I got to the basement, the wooden door was gone. There was just a solid wall where it had been, as if it had never existed. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. The tapes are still somewhere in my house, and I can feel that malevolent presence growing stronger. If anyone has any advice or has experienced something similar, please help me out. I don't think I'm going to get any sleep tonight. I can still hear the creaking of the basement door opening at night, that slow, ominous groan that would make my heart race and my body freeze under the covers. I knew what was coming next, the heavy, plodding footsteps descending the wooden stairs. Getting closer and closer. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let me go back to the beginning. We had just moved into a new house when I was 7 years old. I still remember this house well, with its faded yellow paint and wraparound porch. My parents had big plans to fix it up and make it our dream home. Little did we know of the nightmare that lurked within its walls. The house had an unsettling feel from the moment we stepped inside. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense that something was off, not quite right. My parents dismissed it as an overactive childhood imagination, but I knew better. I could feel it in my bones that there was something deeply wrong with this place. The basement door was the first thing that made my skin crawl. It stood ominously at the end of the hallway. The wood was scratched and grooved, as if something had been clawing at it, desperate to get out. Even as a child, I avoided going near it. Then the noises started. At first, it was just faint creaks and groans that could be explained away by the house settling. But then, they became more distinct, heavy, purposeful thuds that seemed to come from the depths of the basement itself. The kind of sounds that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. My parents heard them too, but they wrote them off as rats or pipes shifting with the temperature changes. I wasn't convinced, though. Oh, hell no. These sounds were too deliberate, too sentient, almost like footsteps. That's when the dreams began. Visions of a figure stalking the hallways, its elongated limbs scraping against the walls, the smell of damp earth and rot permeating the air. I would wake up gasping, my sheets soaked in a cold sweat. The dreams felt so viscerally real that I started to dread falling asleep. Then one night I awoke to that slow, ominous creaking of the basement door. My heart pounded in my ears as I listened to the heavy footsteps ascending the stairs. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to even whimper. They came closer and closer until they reached the hallway outside my bedroom. Then they stopped, as if whatever was making them could sense my presence. I don't know how long I laid there trembling, waiting for something to happen. An eternity seemed to pass before the footsteps finally receded, fading back down the stairs and disappearing into the depths from where they came. I must have cried myself to exhaustion because I don't remember anything else until morning. From then on, the cycle repeated, almost nightly. The basement door creaking open, followed by those agonizingly slow footsteps climbing up towards my room before stopping outside. Sometimes I could have sworn I heard the rattle of ragged breaths or the faint whispers of unintelligible words. Night after night of sheer primal terror, I tried telling my parents, but they didn't believe me. They chalked it up to my overactive imagination, combined with the usual creaks and groans of an old house. No matter how much I pleaded, they refused to take me seriously. So I suffered in silence, dreading each night and the horror it would bring. It all came to a head on my 9th birthday. I had a small party with some friends from school. Nothing too extravagant, just cake, ice cream and games. Everything seemed to be going well, until one of the games led us down the hallway near the basement door. That's when one of my friends noticed something we hadn't before, a series of deep gouges in the wood as if made by long, jagged claws. We all gathered around, filled with a mixture of curiosity and dread. It was then that I noticed the faint scratches continued up the doorframe and along the walls, like some animal had been furiously trying to claw its way out. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable thud of something large and heavy hitting the door from the other side. We all froze, panic seizing our bodies. Then came another thud and another, increasing in intensity. The thuds rapidly grew into a thunderous pounding, the door shaking violently in its frame. My friends began screaming, scattering in every direction. Through their terrified shrieks, I could have sworn I heard a deep guttural growl emanating from the other side of that door, a sound that could only be described as inhuman. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the pounding stopped. A deathly silence fell over the house, amplifying every ragged breath, every pounding heartbeat. That's when the smell hit me, an overwhelming stench of rot and decay, like something had died a long, agonizing death. My stomach instantly churned, bile rising in my throat. I can't describe to you the sheer, visceral wrongness of that smell. As if that wasn't enough, I noticed a faint trickle of liquid seeping out from the seams around the doorframe, a thick, syrupy fluid the color of old pennies that could only be one thing: blood. That was the final straw for me and my parents. We gathered what few belongings we could and got the hell out of that house, never to look back. We went to stay with relatives for a while until my parents could find us a new place to live. I've tried over the years to bury what happened, to blot it from my memory, but the nightmares still come as vivid and terrifying as the day they first started. And whenever I catch a whiff of that unmistakable stench, I'm transported back to that hallway outside the basement door, paralyzed with fear. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little uneasy in my own home at night. You see, I can never fully escape the memories, for I'll never stop hearing those footsteps coming up the basement stairs. In the heart of suburbia, nestled among cookie-cutter homes with manicured lawns, there lies a house that doesn't belong. 47 Maple Street stands silent, its windows like blind eyes, a blight in the otherwise picturesque neighborhood. The locals whisper of its curse, a darkness that clings to the soul of anyone who dares enter. Yet for Alex and Jamie, two teenagers with a thirst for the adrenaline rush of true horror, the legend of 47 Maple Street is an irresistible call. On a dare, they decide to spend the night inside the house, armed with nothing but flashlights and a handheld camera, hoping to capture something paranormal. The front door creaks open with an eerie moan, welcoming them into its dust-choked interior. They step inside, the door slamming shut with a finality that sends shivers down their spines. The air inside is cold, colder than it should be on a summer's night. Their breaths mist in front of them as they explore the ground floor, their flashlights casting long, sinister shadows against the peeling wallpaper. The house seems to breathe around them, a slow, laborious inhalation that fills the silence. As they ascend the creaking staircase to the second floor, Jamie's flashlight flickers and dies, leaving them in near total darkness. They press on, guided by the weak beam of Alex's flashlight, until they reach the master bedroom. The door is ajar, inviting them in. Inside, the air grows even colder, a cold that seeps into their bones. It's then they hear it, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from the closet. The words are indistinguishable, but the voice is unmistakable in its sadness. Compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity, they approach the closet, the camera's night vision casting an eerie, greenish glow. As they reach for the door, the whisper grows louder, more frantic. Alex's hand trembles as he pulls the door open. The closet is empty, no ghostly figure, no hidden monster, just an empty space. They laugh nervously, the tension breaking. Maybe it was all just a story, a legend meant to scare kids. They turn to leave, but the door won't budge. It's as if the house itself has decided to keep them. Panic sets in as they realize they're not alone. The temperature drops further, their breaths coming out in foggy plumes. The whispers return, louder now, surrounding them. It's not just one voice, but many. A cacophony of sorrow and anger that fills the room. The camera picks up shadows moving along the walls, shapes that are human yet not, contorting and twisting in the darkness. Alex and Jamie huddle together, the reality of their situation sinking in. This house, 47 Maple Street, is alive with the memories of those who've passed within its walls, and it does not forgive trespassers lightly. They feel it then, a touch cold as ice on their shoulders, fingers that grip tight and pull. They're separated, dragged into the darkness, their screams echoing in the unyielding night. The camera falls to the ground, recording as the shadows converge on where they stood, the whispers crescendoing into a deafening roar before cutting to silence. When dawn breaks, the door to 47 Maple Street swings open with ease. Inside, the house is silent, the horror of the night hidden away once more. The camera is found, its footage a testament to the truth of the legend. But of Alex and Jamie, there is no sign, vanished without a trace. Their disappearance reignites the whispers among the locals, a stark reminder of the house's dark appetite. 47 Maple Street stands silent, its curse waiting for the next souls brave or foolish enough to enter. And in the heart of suburbia, life goes on a little darker, a little colder, under the watchful gaze of the house that doesn't belong. Emily had always known Mrs. Jenkins as the kind, elderly neighbor who lived in the quaint house next door. They exchanged pleasantries over the fence, and Mrs. Jenkins often shared stories of her late husband and their adventures. One day, Emily noticed something peculiar. The curtains in Mrs. Jenkins' house remained drawn all day, an unusual occurrence for the lively widow. Concerned, Emily knocked on her door, but there was no answer. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's concern grew. She called Mrs. Jenkins's phone, but it rang endlessly without an answer. The mailbox remained untouched, and weeds began to take over the once well-kept garden. Unable to shake the feeling of unease, Emily decided to contact the police. They promised to check on Mrs. Jenkins, assuring Emily it was likely a simple misunderstanding. A police officer accompanied Emily to Mrs. Jenkins' house. They knocked on the door, but again, there was no response. The officer tried the doorknob, and to their surprise, it was unlocked. They stepped inside, greeted by an eerie silence. Dust particles danced in the sunlight, filtering through the windows. The air felt heavy with neglect. As they ventured further into the house, a sense of dread settled over them. The living room was in disarray, as if there had been a struggle. Pictures were askew, and a vase lay shattered on the floor. Their search led them to the basement door, slightly ajar. A cold draft seeped from the darkness below. With trepidation, they descended the creaking stairs. In the dim light, they found Mrs. Jenkins' belongings strewn about. Her purse lay open, its contents spilled on the floor. But Mrs. Jenkins was nowhere to be found. As they turned to leave, a chilling whisper echoed through the basement. "Help me," it pleaded, sending shivers down their spines. The police launched a full investigation, but Mrs. Jenkins remained missing without a trace. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had happened in that house, and the mystery of her vanished neighbor haunted her sleepless nights.